Hello, and welcome to another episode of the ohmTown Daily News Show. I am Mayor Watt. That is ohmTown, ohmTown.com. And I'm here on Twitch. It's also a podcast. It's also a YouTube channel. Just do a search for ohmTown. You should pull up ohmTown wherever and in the many facets that it is. What is ohmTown? I do this at the beginning of every episode. ohmTown is a news aggregation site and hopefully a growing community. I don't get much people posting, but I do have traffic going through, looking at the links and various elements of the site. That said, if you like to hang out, come over to twitch.tv/ohmTown and you'll be able to hang out with me and anybody else who stumbles into my chat. Be sure to like, follow, subscribe, all of that, wherever, because it's in different things. It's in different states. So one site has a like and one has a follow and one has ringing a bell and one has this and one has that. You know what you need to do. But come and hang out. That's really my goal. I like hanging out with people and talking about the news. I talk about it in three main kind of emerged concept of business, technology, and society. It is a triad that you just can't get away from. And I kind of put it out there for people. If you think that there is something that technology can't or hasn't invaded in some way, right? It's facilitated something, it's made something better. Some people might say that it has broken things, but in all cases, there's this merging of business, technology, and society, and you can't get away from all three of them. It just doesn't work. I've been doing this for a long time, talking about it, but I haven't been online talking about it. So at the beginning of the year, I made all of this public. So I've got it out there to everybody. If you think that you can come up with something where tech hasn't moved into it in some way, let me know. I would be curious. Now, what ohmTown does, I mentioned it earlier that it's a news aggregation site. Well, it throws it into 6 categories: create, news, education, entertainment, social, and technology. I'm scrolling across their icons at the top of the website. I'm interested in how people learn things, how things gain meaning. So I even have a site, or not a site, but a channel about it called Semiotic Ontology. I'm interested in making things, so I have a category about creators. I'm very interested in the news. I subscribe and aggregate 200 news sources into ohmTown, about 200. I very interested in education. I'm a lifelong learner. I have multiple master's degrees in not really a broad spectrum of topics, but I also have other lower degrees that fill that other area, particularly sociology. I don't have a master's in sociology. Well, at any rate, very interested in education, so I have channels that I want to bring that involve that. Entertainment, I only have a few, mostly related to niche areas that I'm interested in, like coffee, beer, wine, tea, music, and then the social aspects of things like Law Nerd, which is a show about legal concepts, but from a layman's perspective. I'm not an attorney. Even if I was an attorney, I'm not your attorney. I'm not a working professional in the field as a paralegal or otherwise, but I've gone through paralegal education. That's one of my lower level degrees. And really, there's just a lot of things. So I'm very interested in movies. So I have one called Continuity Report, and just a lot of things that I want to talk about. And right now, it's all aggregated into the ohmTown Daily News Show. And then technology is my biggest topic. mainly because that's what I'm really, 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 really interested in, I guess you could say. I don't know how to put it any other way than just really, really. At any rate, today's news is another broad spectrum of up to about 20 articles. I'm not quite sure. I don't really count. I just kind of click a bunch of articles that I think are interesting based on their title. And I don't even read them beforehand. My reaction, my response to what I glean from the article as I scan through it is authentic and in real time. So sometimes I get a person. I read something and then further down it changes my attitude about something else that I read, and so sometimes, and not sometimes, but at all times, context really matters. So I'll drive home the point that we really need more context, and that's why I do a show like this. Introduce some ideas. I encourage you to go over to the site and then come on back and talk to me about it. And again, I'm trying to be here every day at 11. Unfortunately, I got pulled away, and when I came back, time had flown by, and it's already 1 o'clock here on the East Coast of the United States. So let's get into this. I do only have about an hour. I'm going to try and get through it in a shorter amount of time and try not to soapbox too much. But I do add my particular perspective to the news, again, from the perspective of business, technology, and society. So the very first article is about Star Wars and the new Obi-Wan Kenobi show. The Star Wars franchise is sticking up for one of its own in the wake of online harassment and racism. Moses Ingram, who made her franchise debut in Obi-Wan Kenobi, is the villainous Inquisitor Riva. That in the snippet it's R-I-V-A, but I believe it's Riva, R-E-V-A. Revealed on social media that hundreds of racist messages have been sent to her by toxic fans since the Disney Plus show kicked off. And I'm rather astonished by this. I just can't believe that people are like this, that people believe that any other element but their acting skills or their behavior publicly or privately, if you're, for lack of a better term, a tool, then yeah, you can call people out. But racism is a society concept built around trying to make others less human so that you can treat them inhumanely. And it's rather disgusting. And we really need to get to the crux of this. And it really is all about trying to marginalize a people so that you can abuse others. And that's what racism is. And you can be who you want to be and still be a humane person, right? You can still treat others with respect, regardless of how they dress, what they look like. It really does come down to the content of your character. But for whatever reason, and a lot of people have to go through mandatory training and all of this, right? Uh, and now we're talking about CRT, critical race theory. There's another one called culturally responsive teaching, and that kind of gets twisted together, and everything is bad. And I don't get that because, and worse yet, the people that need to learn these lessons don't pay attention to this. They don't pay attention to the crux of the matter is that we are all human, regardless of cultural upbringing or the color of our skin, or speech mannerisms or whatever it might be. And the abuse needs to stop in all ways, And it even goes so far as world leaders invading and attacking other countries that are largely geopolitical boundaries put up for mechanisms of control. So it scales, and it's the 21st century, for crying out loud. There's no reason for this. There's zero reason for this other than you feel threatened by another human being because of your upbringing, because of your perspective being out of line with the fact that if anybody were to treat you that way, you would be screaming that you're being mistreated. It's absurd. Well, in this article, it says Star Wars calls out racism against Moses Ingram, tells Obi-Wan viewers don't choose to be racist. And that truly is a choice. You choose to be a racist. You choose the way that you are coping with the fact that there is somebody that is, in your impression, your understanding, different than you. Because you wouldn't treat somebody sitting next to you if they were like you, which is really childish in concept, and not even childish. Oh my gosh, I need to correct that, because children aren't inherently racist. this is upbringing, teaching children how to hate others, how to marginalize others, how to separate people based on some linguistic, some kind of way of describing another person, so that you can sit there and go, well, they're different, so I'm going to be racist. And that's wholly what it is. This is teaching, and that teaching has a really long tail. I mean, it's been worse in the past, and now it's actually coming back, seemingly. But it was declining, and it shouldn't even be as a, we've had some hard fought battles to get equality and equity. It shouldn't even be like that. Everybody should be treated the same. But we still have racism. It's institutionalized. It's empowered by being beyond arm's reach. When you are online, you think that you are anonymous. You think that you're untouchable. And for a large cohort of people, they truly are, because they're outside the United States. They're outside the legal system of the United States and treaties. They can abuse and treat people like crap. That's my soapbox. It really needs to just stop. But you can't do it without institutionalizing education. You have to mandate that people learn that humans are humans, of all types, of all races, ethnicities, genders, attitudes, whatever, everything. We're all human. If we have the ability to sit here and communicate like this, and in various ways, whatever it might be, we're human. We're doing. But it's all about education. It's all about education. The more education one gets, that breaks the paradigm of teaching racism. That's how you get rid of racism. You teach people what they've learned from others who are racist is wrong. And you can't do that in a bubble. You can't do that in a state that's an echo chamber of racism, institutionalized racism. Because when you bring up American history and you don't include things like slavery, it's an echo chamber of racism. If you don't teach people culturally responsive teaching, where you are taught that there are other ways of living a person's life and it's different than your particular way. And believe me, the American way of life has evolved over time. And it has been an evolution with a couple of revolutions. Don't choose to be racist, folks. Go over and read this article. It's at variety.com by Zach Scharf. They're repeating and reporting information um, about Moses Ingram. Now, I thought the first 2 episodes were great. You should go and watch them. You have to subscribe to Disney Plus, but go and watch them. Played a great part, and can't wait for the next episodes. The official Star Wars Twitter account stood up for Ingram, writing in a statement, "We are proud to welcome Moses Ingram to the Star Wars family and excited for Reva's story to unfold. If anyone intends to make her feel in any way unwelcome, we have only one thing to say. We resist." That's funny. Because of the resistance. Anyway, Star Wars, it's all about resisting the dark side. And that's what you all should do. If you are feeling like you are about to say something racist, activate your filter and resist the dark side. Fight that teaching, fight that mentality. Treat everybody with respect. Now, if you go out and you have a beer with this person and they say and do things that are horrible, then fine. Stop having a beer with them. If you want to sit there and tell somebody, "Hey, I was having a beer with this person and they were really talking horrible stuff," then fine. Tell them, yeah, they were saying horrible things. But you don't know this person. You don't know how they act in real life. They're actors, for crying out loud. Treat them with respect until they actually offend you in some way, and then just stop watching them. They're not harming you in any way, shape, or form. Why are you on the dark side? Anyway, I'm going to continue. Otherwise, it'll turn into hours long. The next article is in the Mobile Channel. A Russian missile strikes solar power plant in Ukraine. This is something that I've actually spoken about. With green energy, a lot of people talk about solar power or hydropower, geothermal, wind, etc. All of which to me are indefensible energy sources. You can't protect them to the fullest extent that you can something like nuclear and or oil. Unfortunately, we don't have something that can replace this green energy because it's begotten from external sources, right? So you don't drill it from the ground or pump it from the ground. You don't basically make a steam engine out of the radioactive material that you have taken from the ground. So all it takes is somebody to fire a missile, and it destroys wholeheartedly. If it would come to it, you could actually bury a nuclear power plant well underground to protect it from something like a missile, even bunker buster bombs, the massive bombs that are designed to penetrate the earth. But a solar power plant has to be above the surface. You have to get to the sun. And herein lies the rub, that a solar power plant in a area of conflict, a combat theater. I mean, this is a full-fledged war between, well, it's an invasion of Ukraine by Russia. This is what is possible in all of the places where solar power exists, even wind energy. A couple of rounds into a blade throws it off balance and it tears itself apart. So this article is over at vice.com and it's by Aaron Gordon. The 3.9 megawatt facility was partially damaged. Yeah, unless its areas are sequestered so that they don't take out the entirety of the grid, damaging some of it destroys most of its processing power. It's power generation, I should say. So far, Ukraine has managed to avoid massive blackouts despite fighting in and around its power system. In March, Russian troops opened fire at Zaporizhia. I think that's how it's pronounced. The largest nuclear power plant in Ukraine and all of Europe, starting a fire at an administrative building and disconnecting the plant from the grid. And it was reconnected, but We actually, some of us who were watching this situation actually kind of watched it happen in real time. So um, quite unfortunate events going on in Ukraine. Just walk away, Russia, walk away. Let's go on to the next article. I actually just got contacted, and I may need to make this even shorter than I anticipated. The next article is in the Law Nerd channel. Legal malpractice payouts reach troubling new heights. 4 insurers contributed to claims above $300 million, survey says. So the cost of legal malpractice claims are reaching troubling new heights, said Ames and Go in a May 23rd press release announcing the survey results. Ames and Go surveyed 11 leading insurers that provided insurance to 80% of the nation's top 100 law firms. 10 of the 11 insurers had participated in a claim payout of more than $50 million in the past 2 years, including 3 that participated in claims between $150 and $300 million, and 4 that participated in claims of more than $300 million. Wild. The survey report explained that some of the insurers contributing to large claims were likely involved in the same claim because of shared coverage and excess limits coverage. Even so, it's clear that multi-million-dollar payouts are increasing. Well, there's a lot of money floating around, folks. The most common legal malpractice error was a conflict of interest followed by clerical or scrivener's errors. Interesting. So basically documentation. But I guess it would have to show some great negligence in those areas. Conflict of interest is unsettling because it basically implies that people can't represent others cleanly. That somewhere in the practice there's a conflict of interest that led to a biased outcome. When the insurers were asked what is keeping them up at night, their responses included that these reoccurring themes: lateral hires and attorney migration. That can create. I was actually looking for an attorney regarding something that happened to me by a major company, global company, and I could not find a reputable company of any substance that hadn't already done business with that company, and thus conflict of interest existed, and I couldn't hire anybody. So I basically just had to take what was thrown at me and walk away, which was nothing. I mean, ultimately, I wasn't harmed long term, but yeah, it was quite interesting. I'm not going to get into it publicly, but when you are large enough, then you've basically touched every major legal practice. You'd have to find somebody that is kind of a shot in the dark as to what their ultimate performance would be against a major global company. So that's why they're talking about lateral hires, attorney migration, work practices, and supervision related to COVID-19, which isn't a unique one to me, and silent cyber exposure, which refers to potential malpractice payouts on policies not specifically designed to cover cyber risk. And this is a huge one because now the executive suite is liable for any of the cyber exposure that takes place. You actually sign documents that state that you are compliant with certain cyber laws and have taken steps to mitigate. Pardon me 1 second. Okay. So go and check this article out. It's over at the abajournal.com by Deborah Cassens-Weiss. Let me continue on. I just got pinged again regarding something I'll need to attend to. So I would love to be able to turn this into a full-time thing. But right now I'm getting pulled away. And it's really up to listeners, viewers. This next article is in the Hatch Ideas channel. Apple's new iPhone and iPad software will reportedly add lots of big changes. Let's click the link. It'll take us over to, eventually, CNBC. And it says Apple is reportedly bringing... Oh, so in my effort to... Well, I won't even bother. I'll just keep on talking about this stuff. Apple is reportedly bringing a slew of new updates to consumers' iPhones with its upcoming software release. According to Bloomberg, iOS 16 includes updates to notifications, messages, and the Health app. The software will include new multitasking panels for iPads, and its next operating system, iOS 16, is expected to be announced at the annual Developers Conference, referred to as Worldwide Developers Conference, WWDC, on June 6th. So right around the corner here. I'm really interested in the Health app. I actually use it quite a bit. I like metrics. I like tracking data, and about myself, not everybody else. And I just bought a tonal, and so I'm waiting for it to be installed, and it has a ton of tracking stuff, and I'm curious what will come of it. So I love the idea of tracking the benefit of using that tech. So in the meantime, if you want to know more about what might be unveiled, which there isn't much known, if anything really, Jessica Brzezinski over at CNBC did an article on it. And you know what I didn't do? I didn't post that in the chat. So there it is. The next article is in the Word in Tech, wages. Why are they not keeping up with inflation? Well, I can take a stab at it before I even read the article. Margins. People want their profit margins for the company, and the ratio of benefit to work isn't necessarily perceived the same. So you, as an employee, won't get the benefit of $1 billion company or $1 trillion company to the same level that others will. So why are margins not keeping up with inflation? Because the profit margin needs to be big enough to compensate the stakeholders who aren't showing up for work every day. And I'm looking at you, stock market. And there's a lot of machinations that go on with stocks in the background. You know, there's it isn't always the only time that somebody benefits from their stock shares is when it gets released, because it can be bought back and then resold at a higher price by the very institution and by various stakeholders. So the stock fluctuation and the leveraged valuation of those stocks for loans and other things, bonds and whatnot. There have been a huge amount of concern about rising inflation in recent months, and it's made worse by the fact that wage inflation has not been keeping up. A few workers in high-paid jobs have enjoyed higher bonuses and inflation-busting pay raises. It's just been reported that CEO pay has recovered to pre-pandemic levels, for instance, but for the majority of workers, higher price inflation is now eroding the real value of what they earn. Well, over at phys.org, they actually do kind of an analysis of it. Not kind of, they do an analysis of it. And the CPI and total pay have recovered to pre-pandemic level. Actually, well, I mean, CPI is continuing to increase, but total pay is at par with CPI. It used to be wildly outstripping it. Total pay was just massively higher than CPI. So your total pay was way more than what the CPI was. And so you were accruing wealth, great wealth. But regular pay and unemployment, well, not so much. CPI and thus inflation is out of line with what people are making in their monthly annual salary. More than a fifth of workers are struggling to afford the things they need to live. For them, the cost of living crisis is not some hackneyed political slogan, but a fact of life, and it spells real hardship. Its resolution calls for rethinking of policies towards inflation and indeed the economy more generally. Economics textbooks teach us the lower unemployment is the cause of higher wage inflation. The negative relationship between unemployment and wage growth forms the basis of the so-called Phillips curve. The textbooks also refer to the possibility of wage price spirals, where higher prices fuel higher wages. This way of thinking gains support from the experience of the 1970s, when higher prices and higher wages coexisted, leading to a period of stagflation. Well, it's not the same. And I think that that was born based off the corporate economics of the time. If inflation exists, there are inputs that are causing the prices to increase. And thus, you really do need higher wages to offset the cost of purchasing items. But that's not the case here. And it hasn't been since the 70s. And I'd argue that there were other indicators that even back then something else is afoot. But that is not my area of specialty. I'll have to look, though. Maybe I could argue something. I'm sure that somebody will come out of the woodwork. I've had this happen. When I was much younger, I had somebody tell me, "Oh, you think that you have the solution for something," when the greatest minds are working on it, and they still have yet to fix the problem that I was talking about. And now the solution is lost to the four winds. I've been searching for it and I can't find it anymore. But at any rate, yeah. So now you have amazingly profitable companies, amazingly rewarded executives, and the workers are still stumbling around with barely minimum wage or a little bit higher, but the ratio between livable wage and what they are being paid is not aligned. So you're going to have great suffering during inflationary times right now. And people who would benefit from higher wages, some of them are so narrow-minded thinking about it that they think that $15 minimum wage alone will make your cheeseburger, well, $35. It's just not the case. What needs to take place is the profit margins and benefits to the executives needs to fall in line with reality. And just because you're a CEO of a company, of a product that's being purchased, doesn't make you suddenly an economic juggernaut. It's all just disconcerting to me. At any rate, I'm going to continue on. Go check out that article over at phys.org by David Spencer of The Conversation. But it's hosted on phys.org, and the link is right there in the chat. So go check it out. If you want to talk about this more, I've got a bunch of articles still to go, but I'm more than willing to talk about it. Today's just a little harried, so I'm going to have to keep on hustling through the articles, introduce you to a bunch of things. Hopefully you take some time, follow the links, go check it out, and then come on back and talk shop with me. That's what this is all about. I want to talk shop with you. So this is in the Four Wheel Tech channel, and the internet needs to stop getting excited about vaporware EVs. There are a lot of EVs that are designed. I'm actually waiting for one from a company called Canoe, which is kind of like a minivan. Well, it looks more like a VW bus, but entirely EV and very utilitarian. It's really neat looking. And that's the car that I want more than a Tesla. I'm just not really interested in the Tesla at this point. But more to the point, vaporware EVs, and it's going to take more time for innovation and adoption of EVs and the infrastructure to get a lot of people to switch over to an EV, mainly because it takes hours to charge a vehicle. Even 30 minutes is too long in this day and age where I can pull into a gas station, fill my car up in 5 minutes. Now, once we get the uh, grid built that allows me to just walk up to a fast charger and it's 5 minutes, and there are things that are above superchargers. It's just not readily available. Then EVs will stop being vaporware because there's infrastructure there where people will know that the car is going to be bought. Right now, Teslas and whatnot, people haven't even felt the pinch really of the cost of an EV, because when the battery is no longer charging and you have to get it replaced, you're talking about 12, 15, 20, $25,000 depending on the vehicle. It's going to be quite expensive, and ultimately you could probably see the cost benefit if you have at that time close to $20,000 just laying around, because it's going to be expensive. Well, this article over at Ars Technica is saying you got to stop being amazed by vaporware EVs. So this is a DeLorean Alpha 5. It's an EV that's coming out of the DeLorean line with its gold wing doors. It has some amazing style. And it says here, it's easy to render a car, but it's a lot harder to get one into production. And yeah, I agree. It's very okay. So this article is over at Ars Technica, and it's by Jonathan Gitlin. But something that I have observed both in other enterprises and in my consulting, it's very expensive to build a prototype. And once the prototype is built, you can go and hype it up all over the place. But taking that prototype and bringing it to market takes a whole other level of expense. And it's a cost where you have zero realization until people start buying your product. The prototype is actually realized when you drive it out onto a lot somewhere and start selling it to people. And by selling it, I mean marketing it, and people buy into it, so to speak. But actual cash in the bank, because people are buying whatever it is you're selling, that's a whole different matter. And so you have to be able to produce. And right now we do kind of like early access from Steam. We start hyping it up and people start buying into it, like Rivian and even this from DeLorean. Uh, and I've seen it in other things. I mean, there are companies that are producing things where the hype is so massive that they're waiting a decade plus for the product to come out. I actually was an early adopter for a product, and it's been 10 years and I still don't have it. And they still contact me and say, hey, it's coming. Yeah, okay, well, they're going to have to deliver it to my grave, because I don't really suspect that it'll be delivered in my lifetime. And it's true. We need to stop getting excited by vaporware EVs or anything that's just being hyped. The real problem there is that hype translates into investors, it translates into movement in an enterprise, and it's no longer really enough to say to an investor, hey, I've got this product that I want to build, and here it is, and I've got everything in place, and I've got the machinery in place. All I need is the money to make it go. And it's not like that anymore. You have to have public hype. So I suppose that this article is going to be, screaming into the void that we need to stop getting excited about vaporware EVs. Pretty much any enterprise right now is possibly vaporware. It can actually just come into existence, take all kinds of cash, and then you end up in litigation as it collapses. Not to mention stock manipulations and whatnot. So I'm hoping that this comes to market. I'm hoping that it comes at a price that is truly for the market and competing with Tesla. But somehow I doubt it. I think it's probably going to end up being a really expensive vehicle. But this. It says we've got EV fever There are a number of factors at work here. The first is the increasingly commodified nature of the powertrain. Suppliers like Bosch and GKN are more than happy to supply electric drive units, and then you just need a battery contract and someone to do the systems integration. Okay, I realize that someone is doing a lot of work there. That's the author saying all of this. Some engineering consultancies are even offering complete skateboard chassis onto which one can project their dreams. Yeah, I I think that that's really how it should be. There's no harm in it being a commodity, but getting it produced and out onto the market, passing all of the safety checks, and that's a large lift. You have to supply cars for the I just forgot what it's called, but in the United States, there's a transportation safety um, mechanism in place where everything in a car, from the seat belts to the drivetrain to the aerodynamics to the height of the lights and the fenders and all kinds of stuff, you have to follow a certain process. The aerodynamics changes, but you have to have certain things in place. Like, you have to have, until recently, side view mirrors. Because when I was designing a car, I looked into the policies and the requirements, the regulations, and they wouldn't allow electric displays. They wouldn't allow anything in there that could supposedly fail. Um, but I suppose a mirror being torn off was okay. But you had to have a mirror. I mean, it's as simple as a mirror, and it's regulated. So it's quite a heavy lift. It's pretty daunting. So if the money isn't there and the hype isn't there, then there's no money there. That's just how it goes nowadays, at least. It used to be done in the shadows, and then suddenly it comes to market and people were surprised. Not anymore. Let's go on to the next article. This next article is in the Hatch Ideas channel. Owners of Massachusetts ice cream parlor says customers waited in a 45-minute line because they didn't have enough staff, and that's a month ahead of the busy summer season. Customers in a 45-minute line in an ice cream parlor, because there isn't enough workers. I'm sure that there's some confusion as to why. This is a BusinessInsider.com article by Kate Duffy. And it says, he told Wall Street Journal he expected the shop to be busy, but didn't think there'd be no job applicants. The owner added that it was a scary position to be in ahead of peak summer season in June. But really, there are employees. There are going to be applicants. The problem might be that the benefit wasn't there. They didn't see that summer job as being worthwhile because it was paying too little for whatever time they had, because you can't get your time back. This is what I tell people that are trying to figure out what to do in their life. You can't get your time back. So choose wisely what you want to do. Because if you spend a year working on something and you see that it's not really going to flourish, then what really have you done? Take the risk if you can, but you have to be passionate about it. You have to be interested in it. You have to want to do it. And so the Great Resignation and other things going on in the world has made people realize that their free time or something else, their opportunity cost, really is worth more than minimum wage, or having to get in the car and drive for 45 minutes in one direction just to do that minimum wage job. So if it was like this now, what's it going to be like when school is out and people are coming for their summer vacations? Lawrence told the Journal. When you think it can't get worse, it just gets worse. Polar Cave's website says the shop is accepting more applications for summer because of the shortage of available workers on Cape Cod. But they don't really talk about why people aren't applying. They say that it's a shortage of available workers. I suppose it goes a little bit deeper than that. It isn't that there aren't people on Cape Cod. It's that they don't want to work for what's being paid. So let's continue on. I suppose, I don't have that insider information, but maybe they've got it somewhere. This is in Market Extra, and that's over at Market Watch. Brace for another sell-off of U.S. stocks. Reach this technical danger zone. Don't expect the S&P 500 to move much higher than 4250 in the near term. I suspect that we're going to start feeling a pinch as we approach September, moving into the December, the last quarter of the year. I think that inflation is going to continue here in the States. Other countries, other places, they might have the ability to put in some mechanisms, but I think it's going to continue. This is an article over at Market Watch by Joseph Adinolfi. Brace for another sell-off if U.S. stocks reach this technical danger zone. So, according to Jonathan Krinsky, a market technician at BTIG, the new danger zone for U.S. stocks corresponds roughly with the 50-day moving average for the S&P 500 SPX. So it's up 0.11% right now, which is presently right around 42.75, although Krinsky believes equities would meet resistance slightly earlier at around 42.50, which is the top end of the summer chop. He anticipates. So basically, I think that he's getting at the perspective that it's met saturation. It's not going to go any higher because all of the value has already been taken into account. So a counter-cyclical rally pointed to an overstretched positioning in the best performing sectors for stocks, energy, claiming that the strategy of buying winners and selling losers is coming off the most extreme level in over 13 years. Because of this, Krinsky expects a swift bout of counter-cyclical reversion where technology stocks lead markets higher, a dynamic that has already been witnessed during the past week, to the near-term catalyst for a rebound in stocks. Well, we'll have to watch and see what happens. I think that stocks are going to take another dip, as to me, the perspective is that for the most part, you can invest in various things. The everyday Joe like me can invest in various stocks, and the end result really is we either witness something and we try to sell and it's too late, or we're not even aware of any market machinations and we sit there and it all takes place without us monitoring it. And in the long term, it pays off because it's pretty well documented that if you just leave it and forget it at the end of the day, as long as you didn't choose something very, very risky, it's going to grow because the market grows until there is something really catastrophic. That's kind of how it works. And when you manipulate your own money, it tends to not be right. Like it's always bad decision making because we think more emotionally than we should, and we don't have full data like other investors might. So my perspective of this is it's money chasing money, and small investors won't really make much. But when you have millions of dollars to throw around, it actually impacts the market. And then it's fear of missing out. People find out about something and they go chasing after it, and they make a little bit of money. But at the end of the day, those that have the ability to impact the market are going to sell out or sell off their risks and go somewhere else that's safer and wait for inflation to run its course. I don't think it'll run its course without hitting what would be the philosophical rock bottom, which is kind of a recession and a crash. But we shall see. We shall see. The next article is in the Mobile Channel, the underground company that hacks iPhones for ordinary consumers. Activation lock. A message is displayed across the iPhone. This iPhone is linked to an Apple ID. Enter the Apple ID and password that were used to set up this iPhone. This lock essentially turns iPhones into very expensive paperweights. What is this underground company? This is over at vice.com. And they have it says checkmate.info software 3.2.6. So researchers suspect that checkmate.info service is used by criminals to launder stolen iPhones. The tool's administrator claims that the service is just in a response to Apple's poor right to repair policies. Now, this is an article by Stephen Cox. And it looks like it has two bylines. Lorenzo Franceschi Bisharai, I guess it is. I'm not pronouncing it right. Let me know if you know this person or you know how to pronounce it. Throw it in chat or contact me. Anyway, this lock essentially turns your iPhone into a very expensive paperweight. Now an underground group is offering people a way to strip that lock from certain iPhones with its pay-for-hacking service. iOS experts suspect it's being used to remove protections from stolen iPhones. The hacking group is called checkmate.info. But it's spelled check, the word check, and then M in the number 8.info, offering the service, which lifts its name from popular free-to-use jailbreak, I suppose. And since this tool cannot be used by thieves, all right, let's see what else is in here. CheckRain uses an exploit called Checkmate, written by the developer known as Axiomics. I don't like it, but I don't know what I can do about it, Axiomics said in an online chat about the Checkmate service. Either way, I don't support the practice, and neither does the CheckRain jailbreak and CheckRain team. And so just so you know, this is something that they would have to be in possession of the phone, or you have the software and you basically sideload the software. Activation lock is enabled on an iPhone where a user sets up the Find My service, and basically it keeps anybody out, arguably even Apple. But if one company has a certain way to get in, then others have a certain way to get in. You can't have a backdoor. You can't have a weakness. Otherwise, somebody will eventually find it. And it looks like in this particular case, the Checkmate service is using CheckRain, which is a open source jailbreaking tool. So if you can find it and you can use it, go for it. And it only works for certain devices, iOS running versions 12 to 14.8. So if you've updated since then, you're done. At least until the CheckRain service can be adopted to the newer OSs. So ordinarily, if a user was running the CheckRain jailbreak themselves, that would be the end of the process. But checkmate.info, in its mission to co-opt the free piece of software, in turn it asks you to buy a license to complete the hack. The site charges $70 per license, according to the video. In Motherboard's own test, the price has been reduced, and the organization now asks for a payment of $50. So not bad, not bad. So it says in an email that they sell 50 to 150 licenses per month, which works out to sub $10,000. Interesting. Well, this happens quite a bit, folks. So you gotta just don't forget your password. Although I can tell a story where somebody used an iPad. I won't give away anything, but they used an iPad, removed a fingerprint deactivation, a fingerprint lock, and changed the 4-digit code to a 6-digit code, and nobody knew anything. So this was done in the dead of night by a child. So it was very disconcerting. And eventually, the next day, the child remembered the 6-digit code. And by child, I mean like 4. How they did it, no idea, because nobody ever walked them through that. But they did it. Okay, so let me continue on to the next article. or I'm sorry, to the source so that we can actually talk about it. And here we go. Dun, 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 doo, doo, doo. Hold on a second. So there we go. So this next article is over in the Mobile channel, and it's cybersecurity needs a whole of society effort. This is something that I have actually been speaking about. I actually go places and I talk about this. And that is that it can't be somebody else's problem. Cybersecurity is not something that can be granted to someone. You have to be an active participant in your security. So it says defending the homeland normally falls on the federal government, and federal agencies have launched a robust whole of government cybersecurity strategy following are focused on undermining adversaries, promoting network resiliency, and sharing cyber threat information with infrastructure operators. But there's a bigger problem here, and I think the article will end up talking about it. It's over at The Hill. Oh, pardon me. And it's written by Isaac Porsche. Yeah, Isaac Porsche, who's a opinion contributor. And I always say this because they have it on their site. The views expressed by contributors are their own and not the view of The Hill. I always say that when talking about somebody else's article, and they have that little line there. To the surprise of many, Russia has not launched a large-scale cyber attack against the United States or its NATO allies since invading Ukraine on February 24th. And we don't know that. Some people might say that they know that, but they don't know that. You just don't know because there's a lot of compartmentalization. There's no aggregate that's disclosed about success or failure of external threats on the United States or even in other countries. It's really dubious to make a claim that there is no large-scale threat or large-scale attack because there have been. You just see little segments of it. And so it says, but as Western sanctions begin to bite, Russia's imports are plummeting and its GDP is poised to fall 30% this year, according to Institute in International Finance. Well, at any rate, eventually they're going to get to this, I'm sure. And they're talking about background stuff. First step is to proactively engage the adversary by using legal authorities that only the federal government possesses under the Defense Department's aggressive strategy to defend forward. U.S. Cyber Command counters threats early and at their source. For example, Russian cyber operations were undermined in the weeks before the 2020 election by Cyber Command operations. But really, so they're defending infrastructure. They're finding people who are maybe complacent in their government duties of protecting a network. So that's what they do. But you and I and others who also have a non-government life, you also have to be proactive in defending your network. You really should, even at home, have an edge hardware firewall. All of your computers should have a firewall. Windows Defender isn't necessarily enough. I use GlassWire on all of my devices, where appropriate, or Little Snitch on all of the Mac devices. But all of this is something that you as a user can deploy. And even a hardware firewall, it doesn't need to be wildly expensive. There are options out there. And it's best not even to disclose what you have as infrastructure, because somebody who's very motivated might come trying to get inside that door. Why? Because people like challenges, and there's myriad reason why somebody hacks, least of which is probably boredom. There's other reasons why people do it. Just idle hands is good enough, and people can make a career out of it. So at any rate, they talk about it. It says, third, both public and private sectors must enhance cyber resiliency. Doing so is challenging given the range of actors who must coordinate activities. And they're talking more about even the edge of commercial, and not really even individuals, but really it's the individual that needs to learn that they are the weakest link in all of this. And they need to be proactive about their security. Every once in a while, you find somebody that removes a line of code that exposes some data like Heartbleed, which was a thing in financial institutions that divulged a ton of information through a memory leak. And I can go on, but in a nutshell, it's a great message, the whole of society effort where everybody is aware of cybersecurity and is proactive in protecting. Don't let people walk into a building riding on your coattails. Don't let people surf over your shoulder and watch you type your password. Um, don't store passwords in a browser where anybody has access to it. Typically, you don't want to do it at all. But when you have hundreds of accounts, perhaps it's very difficult to do that. But remember, if something ever happens to your account, like your browser, you lose all of those passwords anyway. Anyway, let's move on to the next article. I just got pinged again for a meeting. The next article is in the Daily News Show. Man who won $10 million lottery prize sentenced to life in prison. A North Carolina man who won $10 million in 2017 has been sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for a fatal stabbing of his girlfriend in 2020. How dense. I don't know all of the machinations about this, but it says the News and Observer reports that Michael Todd Hill, 54, of Leland, was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced Friday in the killing of his 23-year-old girlfriend named Keona Graham of Navassa, I guess it is. Graham was reported missing on July 20th, 2020, and later found dead in a hotel room with a gunshot wound. Ugh, God. So you win $10 million and then you do something stupid. In the news release from the 15th century prosecutor, 15th Prosecutorial District of North Carolina, prosecutor said surveillance footage from the hotel showed Hill was the only person in the room. Let's go on to the next article. What would you do with $10 million? I certainly wouldn't go to a hotel room and kill somebody. The next article is crafting sequel My Time at Sandrock off to a strong start. So there's some people that are doing early access of My Time at Sandrock here on Twitch. Dan's Gaming is one right now. As a matter of fact, I'm streaming them. Pardon me. A cartoonishly adorable crafting game, My Time at Porsche, has got a sequel out in early access. My Time at Sandrock seems to have been built on the reputation of Pathia, I guess. Pathia Games' first title. According to the site SteamDB, My Time at Sandrock has already eclipsed My Time at Porsche's all-time concurrent player record. That is a process of growth of the platform, not necessarily just that it was released. And not that My Time at Porsche, over time, people don't really go for the older game. So, really with the hype around Steam and the hype around Twitch, people are gravitating towards Twitch and to Steam, and you basically get a cycle of growth where people are playing it, learning about it, streaming it. People are learning about it more, going over to Steam and buying it, etc., etc. So, sporting over 18,500 players at its launch day of May 26th, a solid win over Porsche's lifetime best of 13,299. Yeah, it's because it was much older game. So My Time at Sandrock probably is driving more people over to My Time at Porsche's as well, or Portia's. I think it's Porsche's though. Anyway, I've got My Time at Porsche's. I don't have My Time at Sandrock yet. Not yet. Sandrock, however, is a lot worse off than Porsche was. Rather than just a backwater, Sandrock is actively economically depressed, struggling for success in the world. And after accepting a job offer to become Sandrock's newest builder, you'll arrive in the wild and rugged city-state, where it's up to you and your trusty tools to restore the community to its former glory. Dun, dun, dun. Let's go over to the article. It's at PC Gamer. It's written by Jonathan Bolding. They always have the article where you can listen to it. It's a little, you can't see my cursor. I never let it be seen on here, but anyway, you can actually click a big red button that has a white play icon on it, and you can listen to this article be read. And what I had already spoken of is pretty much the nuts and bolts of this. Go over to Steam and check it out on early access. Okay, 3 more articles. I'm going to have to jump off of my soapbox so that I can get into this. I'm getting pinged again. CEO Futures Briefing, Imaginology, and critical discussions on the metaverse. So this week we look at Imaginology, which is such a hard word to say for some reason. And I think is a play towards Imagineering, but Disney is the one that owns Imagineering. So Imaginology is a close proximity thereof. The future of foods, new ways to store solar energy, algae that enhances food crops, Saudi's reclamation of the desert for growing food, airline futures, and more. Let's go over to the Futurist. It's actually just futurist.com. And this article, let's see here. So 5 articles to read. It's going to be hard to really discuss all of this. So I think I'm running behind, so I'm going to have to get out of here. But I'm going to just encourage you to go over and read these little snippets. And it's a bunch of links to other articles. So, yeah, I'm just going to have to kind of move on. Sorry about that. So the next article is in the Hatch Ideas channel, a pay freeze versus returning to the office. Workers equally hate both options. Workers dislike the idea of returning to work in full time and, suggesting the staying power of the pandemic era arrangement. So let's click the link. Takes us over to CNBC. And the key points of the article are 45% of people who work from home would be likely to look for a new job if required to return to work in person, according to a recent Federal Reserve survey. A similar share said that they'd do so if their employee instituted a pay freeze. Less time commuting, better work-life balance, and more productivity are the top reasons employees prefer remote work. And workers equate remote work at an 8% pay raise, according to one study, which I think is absurd because your salary does not take into account. I've never known anybody, I've never heard of a single employer ever equating the distance that you have to travel to show up to work as part of your salary. The reason why we pay somebody the value that they are getting is because we equate the work product that they've done with that value. Nothing about I don't pay somebody more because it takes them 2 hours versus 1 hour to show up at work. That's not how it works. That's not how it's ever worked. Only in times where it's a consultancy, where it's part of the contract, where I would say, hey, if I have to show up to that job site, you have to pay me to commute there. So here's part of the valuation. And it's very one-off. I mean, it doesn't happen all the time. Depending on the distance, depending on the heavy lifting to show up for a job site, that's when it might pop up, but not in standard employment. It just never is like that. Anyway, this article is over at CNBC by Greg Iacursi, I guess. Iacursi. I hope I'm pronouncing it right. Man, I've never been troubled by so many names as I have been since starting doing streaming. I guess I don't really say people's last names very often in the real world. Anyway, employees who work remotely don't look favorably on the notion of returning to the office, right? And I've said everything that this article has said so far, except for the valuations, because to me, it's very subjective. 8% to me is not the value that I put on teleworking. I put much greater value on the benefit of teleworking. And it's really in favor of the employer, because for me, I don't have to uh, walk from place to place or spend time traveling, impeding my work-life balance. I'm imminently more available to my employer when I am teleworking versus having to drive into work and go from office to office for meetings and whatever else. When I can fire up a Zoom and meet with people from around the world instantly, that is to the benefit of the employer, not me. I get paid no matter what I'm doing if I'm working. um, I'm doing more because I'm not in transit anymore. So to this point, 45% of people who work from home said that they'd at least somewhat likely to look for another job if required to return to work. The number of job openings has surged to historic levels since 2021, but hiring hasn't kept pace. Yeah, why is that? Why is that? It's probably because people are saying, I want to get paid more. That's why they're not getting hired, because they want more. The CEOs of companies are getting record profits, but the employees aren't getting any of that benefit. In fact, in some cases, they're being told, well, if you're going to telework, then we're going to cut your pay. And that was something that was actually presented to me at one time. I was told that if I was going to be a proponent of working from home, that I should be willing to be a proponent of a pay cut, because they said that I didn't have to come into the office anymore. And it's not actually me; it's another scenario. But I was told about this, and it was quite an interesting discussion with the principal about this. And by principal, I mean the person that was offering this up, because ultimately I had a conversation, and it basically comes down to it comes down to they have no concept of the benefit, and so I had to explain it in greater detail. At any rate, in 2021, 22% of employees worked entirely from home, according to the Federal Reserve, published last week, which polled 11,000 adults in late October and early November. Another 17 worked from home part-time. So roughly 40% of the market either worked from home or worked part-time from home. And I think that could be a whole lot higher, because work-life balance. Oh, look, it says less time commuting, better work-life balance, and more productivity working remotely were the top reasons employees prefer to work from home. All of the things that I have been saying for the last 150 episodes of the ohmTown Daily News Show. Okay, let's continue on. You can go and check out that article at CNBC if you're really interested. And finally, this is the won ruble trading explodes 1,000% in latest challenge to US dollar dominance. This isn't about dollar dominance. This is about greed. This is about profiting from a conflict wherein, because of the collapse of the ruble, you can do trading, financial. It's basically you're trading one cash for another cash, forex trading. And that's where they're making money, because if you keep on driving up the consumption of it, the price goes up. And if you buy and sell the product lower and higher every time, you're going to start making money. But it's all about the fear of missing out. So it becomes an avalanche. And again, this speaks to my statement of it's wealth without value. All you're doing is making more money, and that is not really helping in any way, shape, or form. In fact, in this case, it's causing greater harm, because there are controls that are being put in place that are trying to stop the Ukrainian invasion, the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, and by profiting between the won and the ruble, you're basically facilitating that. This is an article over at marketwatch.com by Joseph Adinolfi. There we go. But the latest sign of hope for the beleaguered Russian currency, and it's not the Russian currency. Oligarchs are making all of their money on this, not the population. The population is still suffering because of this invasion of Ukraine. So this has nothing to do with everyday Joe. This is just causing greater harm. That's my opinion. And the people that need to hear that, the people that need to have a compass like this, they're not listening to me. About 60% of international foreign currency liabilities deposits, primarily in loans, are denominated in US dollars, a level of dominance that has remained relatively stable since 2000 and is well above that for the euro. But it's just money chasing money and generating wealth for everybody except for the middle class and everyday Joes and Janes, I suppose. And that's enough for me and my soapbox, right? So Mayor Watt has to take off to another meeting, and I've been getting emails all throughout this, and I'm going to refresh the front page of ohmTown, and ta-da! You will have a whole new set of news. This happens all the time. Every time you go over to ohmTown, it refreshes the front page, and you should see something new if my aggregator has gone out and grabbed it. Always throwing it into its separate categories and channels, and go check it out. Subscribe to the ones that you are interested in. You can make comments. I've got the voting system, I think, offline right now. It was actually causing a conflict with some of the performance of the site. But at any rate, maybe you, I don't know, go watch something interesting, because I've got to go. So I want to thank anybody who is in my chat, and I really don't know who is in my chat still. It seems weird. When I look, there's a bunch of people, but the counter says only 2. Okay, well, I need your help. Go tell people that I exist, and drag them kicking and screaming back into ohmTown. I'll lock the door. Oh, I said the quiet part out loud. Okay, I'm out. I'll see you tomorrow, hopefully at 11 o'clock. I do have a meeting that I had to triage into place. Hopefully I'll be back by then. So I will see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.